are a lot of people here already, and we don't want to keep you waiting too long. I'll be happy to introduce Matthias. Dr. Matthias Rothensee is of course, one of our favorite colleagues here, a research director at iSquare and responsible for not only all our methods and our scientific research, but also for our brand and media research and all of the publications in this field and the global studies you have done in the last year. We'll learn a bit more about today. And so we welcome all of you. And I would just hand over to you, Matthias.
Yeah, thank you for the intro, Philip. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm happy to have you all on board on this webinar today. We're happy to present a few studies that we've conducted over the last year. They all focus on social media advertising and how social media is able to drive sales. Actually, this will be the main topic of today's session. A bit organizational stuff beforehand. The session will last about, or my slide deck lasts about 30 to 40 minutes at maximum. And you're welcome to write any questions or comments in the chat section. And you can also participate in a discussion at the end if you want to. Just feel free to ask any questions about the things that you see along the way. Before we dive into the topic of social media advertising, just a few notes about iSquare for those of you who don't know us so well. We're a company that's been founded more than 25 years ago in Berlin, but we are operating on a global scale. We have offices in 6 countries, already more than 100 employees, and we conduct user, brand and media, and shopper research on a number of consumer touch points. What makes us, what distinguishes us from other companies in the market research domain probably is that we focus on natural and context environments, which you will learn to know more about in this webinar today. That's why I don't explain this any further here. And we use implicit methods to record user behavior on various social platforms, for instance, in order to better understand consumer behavior in general. And I thought about how can I make the intro to social media advertising, and being a researcher in a research house, the easiest thing we can do is present a first study to you. So let's jump right into the topic. I want to first present you some main findings of a media ethnography study that we conducted for Screenforce in the last year. It's called Into the Wild, and some of you might have seen already some informations from this study because it's been published. It's been published last year and it's been on stage nearly everywhere. Into the Wild, the study used media ethnography technology, so eye tracking, to understand how people consume media in their in-home environments. That's why it's called Into the Wild. That's why we moved to the living rooms of respondents in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And we record what's on their screens while they consume media, on different screens at the same time. We use eye tracking technology. You see a hardware eye tracker here in the top right image. That's used to have a precision signal of attention in the living room. And we recorded a vast amount of ad contacts, more than 4,000 ad contacts in our sessions. And the first thing that we did was simply count the number of ad contacts that we have on the platform. And before we talk about social media specifically, we can widen our focus and look at different media platforms first. And what we see here is when we compare TV, video on demand, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, is that on Instagram in particular, we see a very high number of ads that people see when they surf an hour on Instagram. This is extrapolated. Not everybody surfed for an entire hour on Instagram. But when we multiply this up to an hour, we see that we have 44 ad contacts on Instagram compared to in the 20s of ad contacts on all the other platforms, and streaming services being even a bit lower. So that means there's a high ad load on Instagram and on TikTok as well. So many people are confronted with a high number of messages on these various channels. This This is the first number that I wanted to show you. And this, of course, means that people see a lot of advertising on the social media channels. And what they do, and as a consequence of that, is they filter out a lot of ad messages along the way. So they give only very little attention to the ad messages that they see on the platform. What we see here is that the average attention gaze duration that we have on the various channels, TV and streaming services, get 15 to 20 seconds of attention on average when an advertising is shown to the consumers. And Instagram and TikTok, they have to work with only 2 seconds, so much less attention on these social platforms. And this is, so to say, the baseline that we're starting out today. We know that attention windows on social media platforms are very short attention spans. You all know this from your own media behavior. When you scroll through your Instagram feeds, for instance, you pay only little attention to the ads that are there. You are very fast to scroll past these advertising messages. And that's why the question is, of course, can these short contexts on social media produce any effect? Can there be any outcome for brands being achieved on these social ad contacts? And you will learn today that the answer is definitely yes, if you follow some rules on the platforms. So we know that social commerce is a big topic in the market. These are some statistics, global increase that we expect. We expect by 2028 to the sales in social commerce to increase up to 1 trillion euros. So that's a huge figure. And of course, if social advertising wouldn't be effective, nobody would invest such high amounts of advertising budget in the platform. But how can we do this, and how can we leverage the power that is within social advertising to make the most of it? This will be the focus of today's presentation. I will show you three results, or some extracts from results from studies that we conducted in the past year. The first study will deal with the role of creators and creator cooperations with brands in the marketing mix, a study that we conducted with Snap and OMG in the US. Then we will have a look at the second study that we also conducted in the US for the Advertising Research Foundation, that goes more into the details of how are the mechanics of ad effects really, how sustainable are the ad effects that we can detect on social media platforms, and how does this relate to long-term sales effects. And the third study will focus on the role of attention and platform in shaping the attention and purchase effects that we can measure. And with that being said, let's start out with the first study that I wanted to present you in detail today. It's called Authenticity Cells, Creators Enhance Brand Reputation and Commerce. And maybe one additional word before I start into the presentations. These are all public presentations that are available upon request. So if you are interested in this very slide deck that I present today, or if you want to dive into deeper detail with the studies that I show you today, just drop us a note, write me an email, or send us an email to marketing@isquare.com, and you will receive the decks that I present you today in more detail. Because, of course, I will show you only some highlight findings from the studies here. So let's jump right into the first study, Authenticity Cells from Snapchat. So the study that I wanted to show you is about creator corporations. And you all know that creators play an integral role in marketing in these days, in digital marketing. Why is that so? Because creators can achieve some effects that traditional advertising just cannot do. Reaching target groups, younger target groups that you cannot reach with traditional linear TV advertising anymore, building a community, but also transferring the brand that the creator is onto the brand that is cooperating with the creator. So achieving some halo effects, struggling to produce something authentic for the brand. These are all reasons why big brands cooperate with creators in order to achieve their marketing goals. And the study that we conducted here last year together with Snap dealt with the question: how effective is this creator cooperation for a brand like the big brand that we see advertised here in the example. So now let's talk about methodology before we start into the results of the study. I will explain the methodology here in this study a bit more in detail, but in the next studies I will be much shorter because the studies that I will show you today all make use of the same ingredients to analyze the sales effects of social media. What we first need is to expose people to social media advertising. And we could do this with live campaigns, but we have a handy tool at hand that is called in-context testing. And those of you who know iSquare, you know that we are pioneers of in-context testing, that we have a platform ready that supports all these ad formats in a simulated sandbox environment that gives us the possibility to really put advertising into social media context with an authentic media exposure situation. These are not real Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, but these are simulations with live actual content of the platforms. We connect with the APIs of the platforms in order to get content that is local, that is current from the day, that is really authentic. And we use these platforms to show people advertising that we want them to expose them to. This also has the big advantage that we can make use of behavior measurement. We can see how long people looked at the ads, how long it took until they swiped past them, if they activated sound, if they commented, liked, and all these social functions. And we exposed people in the US, 5,000 consumers between the ages of 30 to 49, to advertising across 3 verticals. And we had a specific schedule for the advertising that we showed people. In fact, we had 2 groups on all these platforms. One group saw standard advertising from the brands. One brand, for instance, was Levi's. We showed them Levi's advertising, and we showed them this Levi's advertising for 2 times in 2 sessions, one after the other. And this is traditional advertising. Levi's shows you a pair of jeans, a model that's showing the pair of jeans and telling something fancy about the brand. And another group that had the same sequence of 2 ad contacts, but the first ad contact was a creator cooperation. So a famous US-based creator telling something about a new AR assistant from Levi's and making up the consumers' minds about the brand. And after that, we showed them a standard ad of Levi's again. And now what you see next is a comparison of these 2 groups when it comes to the advertising effectiveness. But what we also need is a way to measure sales effects. And this is what you see here in the middle of the picture. After exposure to the social ads on social media platforms, we send people shopping. We programmed virtual shopping environments such as Walmart in the US, for instance, or Amazon. And we asked them to shop for products that belong to a certain category. Here, for instance, you see Fresca, a soft drink, and we asked them to shop for soft drinks for home delivery. And what we can do here on these shopping platforms is we can measure behavior. So, for instance, how long is the product in view in the search results list? Do people decide to click on the product to have a look at the product detail page? And then at the end of the day, do they click add to cart to add the product to their cart? This all is followed by a standard advertising effectiveness questionnaire, but the main methodology here is the shopping task in the middle, and this will be the focus of all the studies that I show you today. So we have social media ad exposure and then the shopping task, and we can relate one to the other. Now, what are the results of the studies? Maybe before I dive into the results of the studies, another note on how can we create these shopping environments, for instance. We use a platform that is called the Digital Experience Sandbox. Digital Experience Sandbox allows us to create any e-commerce platform, any media platform that we desire, and manipulate products, for instance, use this platform to show to clients and also to ideate new forms of display of products and so on. And we can use this platform in a very flexible way. And this platform has been employed in this study in order to produce this Walmart environment that you just saw. And with that being said, we can dive into the results of the study. So you remember we had these different advertising groups, one with the creator cooperation, the other with the traditional advertising exposure. And we see that creator advertising has a 16% longer viewing duration compared to traditional branding ads. So this might sound familiar to those of you familiar with the subject matter. Creator ads are looked at longer than branding ads because they are simply more interesting. They evoke more curiosity, and maybe also the authenticity of the creator himself is a factor that creates more interest in the advertising, because it's not real advertising. It's a creator cooperation. People look at these ads for a longer time. And then it's no surprise that on a cognitive level, the ad recall, for instance, or the unaided brand awareness increase compared to the control groups, that people have an ad recall and they remember the brand. Levi's, for instance, there was an ad from Levi's to a certain amount. This is something that we can reliably detect. But of course, today we're talking about sales effect, and that's why I wanted to show you the sales effect. If we compare the creator marketing groups with the traditional marketing groups, we see that there's an increase in product detail page viewings. So the percentage of respondents who went to the product detail page of the product that they have seen advertising of about 7 to 9%. And the same is true for the brand purchase. So we see that there is a direct sales activation right after the ad exposure when people have been exposed to, for instance, Levi's advertising. This appears to be a bit stronger for Snapchat than the average of the other social platforms, but that's not the point today. We're talking about the sales activation. And what we see here is that sales activation really exists, even if these ad contacts have been very short. And of course, the question remains, why are these creator ads so successful in evoking these sales activations? This might have to do with these halo effects that I just explained. So there's a brand like Levi's, they want to cooperate with a creator because they think there's a halo effect of the image transfer, and it really exists. What we see here, if we compare the left column, the yellow figures, with the right column, the gray percentages, is that the brand itself, Levi's, for instance, is evaluated as being more innovative, cheerful, electrifying, and it also creates more product interest and more brand trust compared to the standard ad group. So if you see a standard Levi's ad 2 times in a row, it doesn't change much in your evaluation of the brand. But if you see a creator cooperating with the Levi's brand, then it somehow creates more interest in the product and in the brand itself. So these are, of course, small differences, but they are really reliably there, and they can be interpreted as being a halo effect that we see here. This, of course, has some preconditions. This doesn't happen automatically. We also asked consumers, why do you follow some creators? And they said, well, it's about entertainment. I want to get entertained on Snapchat, for instance. I want to get high quality content and authenticity. That's why also the topic of the study, or the name of the study, is authenticity sells, because it's all about authenticity. It's very important that the creator doesn't really follow a script that has been written by the brand that is cooperating with the creator, but rather that the creator follows his own script and uses his own creativity to advertise the product that's been in the focus of the cooperation. And with that, we leave the first study here with some takeaways. We learned that creators drive upper and lower funnel brand metrics. We saw that the creators can also brand reputation because the brand receives some kind of halo image transfer effects, and authenticity and entertaining are musts in order to work for this creator content. With that being said, let's move on to the second study. In the second study, we will deal a bit more with the mechanics of the advertising effects that we detect on social platforms. So we learned already that social platforms can evoke purchase activation. And let's move on with another study that focuses on the long-term ad effects that we can detect. First, I wanted to familiarize you with the key facts of the study. So it was a study that we conducted in the US in August last year. on the smartphone on 3 different social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And we used campaigns from 2 famous brands in the CPG domain, beverages and soft drinks, for instance, 6 ads so that we can generalize the results. And the sequence of tasks was a bit similar to that you just saw in the Snapchat study. We first had a screening in order to make sure that everybody belongs to the target group of the study. And then we exposed people to social media ads on these various platforms following a strict schedule of 3 series of ad contacts on 3 consecutive days. So that could be a standard media plan that we expose people to. And then we waited. We waited for a long time, 5 to 54 days of delay. We invited respondents after some predefined intervals, and then it took another few days for them to respond and come back to the survey. So it took in effect between 5 and 54 days before they really answered the survey. And before answering the survey at the end of the task sequence, they again conducted some shopping tasks. So you see the basic layout of the study is similar to the Snapchat study, but we have more time delay between ad exposure and warm-up shopping task. And let's have a look at what happens in between, or if we can detect shopping effects for a sustained amount of time. In order to understand the next charts, I wanted to show you how we sorted respondents into the delay groups that I will present you in a minute. We split them by week. So we had some respondents that answered the survey and conducted the shopping task 1 week after their last ad exposure. We would call this long-term ad effects already, because the standard idea would be that social media ad effects last for only a few days. So 1 week delay would also be a long-term already. But then we had a group that had 2 weeks delay, so longer-term ad effects if we detect any. And we had a 3 weeks group, even longer. We had the 4 weeks group and longer, and we had the 5+ weeks group. It's more or less eternity. So it's really, if somebody remembers an ad that he or she has seen 5 weeks before, this would be absolute eternity and absolutely astonishing finding. So what did we detect here if we conduct this split? What you see here in this chart is the comparison between control group and test group in the stated purchase intent. So we asked people in the survey, the next time you are grocery shopping, how likely are you to purchase the following brands? And we can split this by exposure groups, 1 week, 2 week, 3, 4, 5+ weeks delay. And what you see here is the difference between the light blue and the dark blue bars is statistically significant in the first 2 weeks after exposure. So there are some effects also 3 weeks and beyond, but they are not statistically significant. That's why they are light gray here and carrying no asterisk. But the first 2 weeks are statistically significantly different from each other. So the test group is stronger than control group. So there is an effect that we can detect for 2 weeks after ad exposure. This was a very surprising result, to be honest. We expected something more short-lived to fade away within the first few days after ad exposure, but we saw reliable statistical effects within the first 2 weeks after ad exposure. So that was quite interesting. But we didn't only ask people for their stated purchasing intent, we also measured their shopping. As already explained to you, we measured it on Walmart here, and we can also detect these shopping activations in their actual behavior. So what you see here is the comparison between test and control group of those percentages of people who put the advertised brand in the cart in the shopping exercise. We see that the effect sizes here are really big. So the difference between test and control group are really huge. 300% uplift from 6 to 25% or from 7 to 18%. But again, this percentage fades after 2 weeks. So the time duration that it takes until these effects are vanished are somewhat similar. So when we compare the saying with the doing, so we have a specific look at the say-do gap from a methodology perspective, we can compare the stated purchase intent and the actual purchase behavior, and we can at the same time zoom into these time durations even further. So what you saw on the axis before, was the split into 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, and so on. Now we zoom into the specific days that people had of the delay after that first ad exposure. And what we see here is that the stated purchase intent remains measurable until 12 days after ad exposure. So 12 days is almost 2 weeks. So this is the time period where we can detect reliable effects here. But when we have a look at the right chart, on the other hand, these are again the actual purchases in the shopping task. We see that these effects fade at an earlier point in time. So after 7 to 9 days, we cannot reliably detect any effects anymore. If you have a closer look at the rightmost column here, between 7 and 15%, there is still an effect, but it's not statistically significant anymore. So these actual purchase activations, the behavioral measurement, fades quicker than the stated purchase intent. And this was a very particularly interesting finding here that we see when we ask people about their purchasing behavior. They state that the advertising effects hold longer than when we measure their actual purchase behavior. And the effect sizes are much higher when we have a look at the actual purchase rates. So the purchase measurement using our in context platform, the Walmart shopping task, is much more sensitive as an dependent variable in this specific scenario than the actual stated purchase intent. So it's always better to measure the behavior than to ask simply questions about their likely purchase behavior. So that's it for the second study. So you learned that the advertising effects can last for a long time, even though sales effect can last for up to 9 days after ad exposure. This is quite interesting. But let's move on with the final question. How can we use creation and media to maximize the impacts of these effects? So what can be done on the specific creative that we employ for the advertising campaign, and where should we put it in order to have a maximum effect? Does the media platform have an effect at all? This leads us to the last study that I wanted to present you today, the Atlas project, another study that we conducted together with the ARF. And this study employed a similar methodology, but we had a slightly different test design. We had 4 brands that we included. We also wanted to widen our focus, moving away from the CPG domain or from the food and beverages domain to have a focus on another CPG product category, skincare, and also consumer electronics, the headphone category, to see how these effects really are general for other domains or if they are not generalizable. And we invited 1,200 respondents using Dynata online panel. These were all 18 to 49-year-olds with a gender mix, and we showed them advertising for 4 brands on 3 vertical video top platforms. There was also one particular question that we had was that the platforms that we used, you will see them in a minute, they all offer full screen vertical video exposures. So isn't the mechanics of these platforms similar in a way, or are there differences, even if the format that they use in order to show these ad messages, the format is quite similar, but are there still differences between the platforms? This we will see in a minute. But before that, I wanted to introduce another methodology that we used in this study. We didn't only record user behavior on the platforms, but we also used eye tracking technology to follow the gazes of respondents. A brief introduction of how eye tracking works on smartphones. We have a short calibration phase here. Then we ask people to follow a dot on the screen. This is the calibration where the smartphone learns how the pupils look at these dots on the screen. And after the calibration phase, we expose people to content on the social media platforms. This is the integrated technology that we use. We call it SEAL. It's our own proprietary technology, where we're also having a patent pending in the US. And this gives us an additional stream of data that we can analyze. We not only have the in-context behavioral measurement about visibility of the ad, click share, proportion of sound activation, but we also learn about how high is the reach, how big is the percentage of viewers that actually looked at the advertising? How long did they look at the ad? This is called the dwell time or the attention seconds, and how long it took them to look at the ad for the first time. And we will focus on the dwell time or attention seconds for this study. The platforms that we exposed people to were YouTube Shorts, Instagram Stories, and TikTok, and they all work in a similar mechanic. Full screen ad exposures, swiping away, full screen contacts, short but sweet, so to say. When we have a look at the attention that we measure on these platforms, there are differences between them. That was kind of interesting first finding that YouTube Shorts has a shorter attention span than the other two platforms. The other get 5 seconds on average on the average attentive seconds that we measure, but YouTube Shorts only 3 seconds. Why is that so? If we have a look at the viewer retention graphs, we see how different these graphs look. We see that the YouTube Shorts exposure has less respondents that stay for a longer time and more respondents that jump off after the first second of ad exposure. This is not the case, or is the case to a lesser amount on Instagram Stories and TikTok. But we have more long tail exposures. Not so many, but at least some people decide to watch the content that they see here for 10 seconds and beyond. And this was an interesting first findings. Does the ad exposure here create shopping effects? Again, it does. When we have a look at the two categories that we had here, this is true for headphones. Here you see the difference between JBL and Skullcandy in the dark blue bar, the advertised brands and the non-advertised brands, and the same shopping task in the light or in the white bar here. And we see a reliable difference. And this is the sales uplift being evoked by the ad contact beforehand. And this elasticity is even higher for the skincare category, probably because the products are cheaper. It's easier to say, well, I want to try out the Nivea or Veleda product for a single occasion when I had an ad contact. At least we see there are shopping effects that we can detect here on these social platforms. Now, if we have a look at the relationship between the ad exposure attention and the purchase rates, we could have the idea that there is a relationship, really a correlation between them. And what we see, if we have on the one hand, the different attention spans on the platforms, you remember the different attention curves that I showed you a minute ago, then we can put this into relation with the relative purchase rate on Amazon. What we did here is that we used the platform with the weakest attention and normalized this to 100% shopping rate across all the brands that we had in the study. Now, when we have a look at the other platforms that had longer exposure duration, we see that the relative purchase rates on Amazon after the exposures are higher. So that means that there seems to be a relationship between the attention on the platform and the relative purchase rate on Amazon for the specific product that has been advertised a few minutes ago. And this is, of course, an interesting finding for us. Talking about relationship, we are always eager to use the latest methodology to really prove that there is a relationship. We can make use of a regression model, and we use this technique in order to try to predict whether a respondent will purchase a product on Amazon or not. We used logistic regression here, and what we can do, of course, social psychology tells us that when you want to predict purchase of a specific product, why not ask people, will you buy this product next time you are shopping on Amazon? This has some relationship to purchase on Amazon, but interestingly, if we introduce a second factor in the regression analysis, the attentive seconds, this has an independent predictive value predicting purchase on Amazon. So it's not related to the stated purchase intent, but it's independent. And the model quality is not so high here. There are, of course, a number of other factors that are responsible in predicting a purchase on Amazon, consumer metrics like loyalty, demographics, and wealth and whatever, brand loyalty. But there is a relationship of the attentive seconds over and above the stated purchase intent. This was very interesting in itself. And in order to make this a bit more or give this a real world example, let's imagine two respondents in our studies, Gina and Robin. They are fictitious examples, of course, but let's imagine that Gina and Robin being asked about their stated purchase intent, say 4 out of 5. Next time I go shopping for headphones or cosmetics, there's a 4 out of 5 chance that I will buy the product. So now when we measure the attention on the platforms and we see that Gina had a 5-second attention on the advertising on the platform, but Robin only a 3-second attention, then we can predict who of those two will buy the product. It will be Gina more likely with a slightly higher likelihood than Robin. And this is an interesting finding here. And let's dive a bit more into details here because we have the statistical power to do so. We can also analyze this even deeper and talk about branded moments for a moment. Of course, everybody knows that an advertising consists of story elements. We're talking about video advertising here, right? So an advertising consists about story elements and branded elements. Branded elements, the product is visible, the brand is visible, shines here on the video. This is typically the case at the end of the spot, but sometimes also in the beginning of the spot. And these are specific brand moments in the advertising. Now we have another two people here, Brenda and Keith, and both of them look at the ad for, let's say, 1 second, but they did do it at slightly different positions in the playing duration of the ad. What happens here is that Brenda, on the one hand, has branded contact to branded advertising moments for 2 seconds, whereas Keith has only contact for a split, for a half second or something like that, because he didn't look at the right time at the advertising. He looked at the ad in moments where the product wasn't really visible. Now, does this notion of the branded moment has an additional explanatory power when predicting purchase on Amazon? Yes, it has. So the modeled quality rises by 35%, and the branded attention prediction value is even stronger than the prediction value that we had when we took the overall attention into the regression model. So an interesting finding here itself, focusing on branded attention gives us more explanatory power in predicting purchase on Amazon than focusing on general attention on the ad, independent of the moment of specific ad content here. So that was the last, these were the last figures I wanted to show you here, the last analysis. So let's move on to the key takeaways of today's presentation. We learned that social platforms offer short but high impact windows for branding, windows of opportunity, so to say. So you saw that even though the attention spans are very short on these social platforms, you see that these are very impactful moments that you can use for your branding messages here and to conduct high impact advertising. Social ads generate effects along the entire marketing funnel. So you learned across 3 independent studies that sales are really affected by social advertising. So it's not only about creating brand image, but it's also about creating sales effects in real world shopping exercises. This, of course, has some preconditions when it comes to creator marketing. You should rely on authentic, entertaining creator collaborations in order to make the most out of your social media advertising strategy. And what the second study showed us was that there are long-term effects. This also means that as a brand, you need to have an always-on strategy. Just because you ended your social campaign last week doesn't mean that there's nobody coming to your website landing page anymore. You have to expect customers to come in at any time. This means that you have to run an always-on strategy for your brand. And what the last study shows is that the attention windows on seemingly similar platforms can be vastly different. So you have to adapt your creative to the attention windows of these different platforms. You have a faster cut on YouTube Shorts, for instance, have more brand mentions on YouTube Shorts compared to other platforms where you have a little more time, and to take into consideration or to consider adding more branded moments in your video advertising is also a good idea, because you saw that branded attention can have more impact than attention itself. So this is meaningful attention, so to say. And with that being said, I finished with the results I wanted to show you today. We have collected some questions in the chat, I guess. And I'm happy to take any questions or discussions now at the end of the presentation. first of all, thank you for your attention until here. And now let's move on to some questions and answers between our discussion.
Well, thank you, first of all, Matthias. And yeah, it was a lot of input. And maybe you could also help us to kind of start from the beginning. There were 3 studies, right? You started with the Into the Wild study. That was the actual at-home media research, right?
Yeah, it was a dirty trick of the presenter. In fact, it was 4 studies that I showed you today, but I focused mainly on 3 social media studies. That's why I thought it would be okay to show you some results of the 4th study.
Then we had the Snapchat study with their creators, and then we had which one was the one with the eye tracking? Because there's an eye tracking question, of course.
The last
Which
study.
project was this?
The Atlas project included eye tracking as well.
Yeah, and here the question was, you mentioned the algorithm, and this was not webcam, but it was actually smartphone eye tracking, right?
Yeah, it is smartphone eye tracking. You can use the algorithm Seal, it's called. You can use this on smartphones as well as with webcams on traditional desktop interfaces. But these days, social advertising takes place mostly on mobile. That's why it's important to measure attention on smartphones instead of desktops.
Cool. Thank you. And there was a question about the social media study. So I guess the Snapchat study. And the question is the environments that you compared. So it was not only Snapchat, but it was compared with other platforms, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
We compared Snapchat to other platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, I think. And we saw some advantages of Snapchat as a platform. I didn't want to go into detail here too much because this is just beyond the time that we have for this presentation, but there are also some interesting findings why creator corporations are particularly important on Snapchat, why they are effective there.
Mm-hmm. And the question was aiming at this shopping task, how you did it, that there was an actual dependent variable, if I get it right.
Yeah, it's a dependent variable because we use this as a measure of effectiveness. We compare the control groups and the test groups, or the traditional exposure groups with the creator cooperation exposure groups, and we measure the shopper behavior that relates to the brands that they have seen advertising of. The experimental plan behind the study is a bit more complex. It has a specific schedule of the different brands. They are mixed with each other. So it's not only a Levi's group only, but there are other groups that mix these ad contacts with Levi's with other brands. But the basic setup is that you see advertising for a specific brand like Levi's and are asked to do some fashion shopping on Walmart or Amazon afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the last question concerning this creator study was, you said it's all these studies are published. Shall we send the links to all the participants? Is that what you kind of had in mind, since they are already published somewhere on the internet or on our homepage, or?
Well, I would say if you are specifically interested in one of these studies, just get in touch with us and we can send you the deck of today. So all these slides are public, but if you want to have more detailed information, we are also happy to send you the detailed decks of the studies that we showed you today. We just want to put too much trash into your inboxes, so to say. So let's do it that way, that you send us an email if you are interested in these reports.
Perfect. And does anybody else have any questions here in the webinar? You can write them. We can also, of course, give you the right to speak here. If you raise your hand, be happy to do that. If not, that's also fine, and we'll make sure to send you the updates. And so the kudos go to you, Matthias. Thank you so much for taking us through these 4 studies. A lot of insight for everyone. Thank you for taking all of this in. And I think then we're also good. If nobody raises their hand here, people say thank you very much, and that goes directly to you. And then we'll be happy to reach out, notify you again if there are more interesting insights from our brand and media research team. Thanks, Matthias, Klaus, and to you and to all of you. Have a nice afternoon or morning, depending on from where you dialed in.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.